Welcome to everybody, and we're glad you're here. I was just about to say that one of the things that I've become acutely aware of in the 71 days our shop has been closed is that I was even more fond of the community we've built than the actual physical shop we've built, and became painfully aware of how important that's become, and not being able to see so many of you during that 71-day period. So if nothing else we're accomplishing this morning, we're getting a chance to see each other again, and that's great. We're delighted to have the opportunity to share a lot of information with you this morning. The main event is going to be Dallas and his team presenting our shop reopening plan. I know that's what you're most interested in and we're most excited about, but we're also going to use the opportunity to update you on some other things going on in the shop and the association very quickly before we turn it over to Dallas. The purpose of the meeting today is to continue to communicate with you as to keep you abreast of what's going on in and about the shop, why and how it affects you and your potential use of the shop. We're going to answer the questions that we know you have, as well as give you the chance to ask any that we might have missed. And we also look forward to your input. The plan that you're going to hear and see is a tentative one, subject to any additional ideas or thoughts that you offer today. So you're very much a part of the planning process in that sense. So the agenda will be, I'm going to just offer you some quick updates on some other things going on in the shop. And then I'm going to ask Travis to give you a quick update on some things going on in the association, and particularly the upcoming general meeting, which we're very excited about, coming up Wednesday night. And I've asked him to talk about his Zoom network. If you have not been part of a Zoom meeting before this, you are really missing out. And so I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit about the efforts he and a lot of people that he has enlisted have made to keep our members engaged during the shutdown period that I think has been enormously successful. And as recently as this last hour, we had a great presentation that all of us got a lot out of, I'm sure. And then, like I said, the main event will turn it over to Dallas, and he and his team are going to lay out the plan that they've put together. And I think you're going to be extremely impressed at the extent and the professionalism that they have put into the plan, and again, give you the opportunity to understand it and ask questions about it. And then finally, you'll have plenty of time at the end of the meeting to ask additional questions and make further input. We will adjourn formally at 12 o'clock, but Dallas and I and Travis will hang on for those of you that still want to chat further or ask additional questions or make further input. So everybody will have plenty of opportunity to have their say and get their questions answered. As I mentioned, and Travis will go over any rules that I miss here in a moment when he speaks, but we've got you all on mute right now, again, just so that everybody can hear without having to put up with the background noise of 70-some computers being on. But when it comes time for you to ask questions, first of all, what we'd like to do is, as you have questions, please use your chat function. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, and if you're not seeing it, move your cursor to the bottom of your screen. And right in the center of it, you'll see a little chat icon. And if you click on that, you'll have the opportunity to type in a question. I've asked Travis to monitor and consolidate those questions for us so that we can answer them as efficiently as possible. And that will allow us to get the information out without interruption, and then still be able to capture all of the questions that you have.
Mistake.
All right. Before I ask Travis to talk, I just wanted to kind of reframe where we're at. On March 13th, we made the decision to close the shop. Obviously a very difficult decision, but an important one. And the reason we made it, and Travis and Dallas and I spent an awful lot of time and anguish making that decision, but it became clear at that point that to protect the health and welfare of our members, and particularly our shift supervisors, we really no longer had a choice. We needed to shut the shop down until we learned more about what the coronavirus was all about and how it was going to affect us, and to make sure that none of our people were adversely affected because of our shop operations until we better understood it. Not everybody was crazy about that decision. It was a difficult decision, but I still think it was the right decision. Not everybody will probably agree with our decision to reopen the shop. You know, as you look at the spectrum of our citizens across the country, there's a clear extreme on both ends. There's some people that just think we ought to hunker down. Nobody should leave their house until the thing blows over. And on the other extreme, there's people that still feel that this is nothing but hokum, and we never should have shut anything down to begin with. And in my mind, somewhere in between is the right place to be, and that's what we're attempting to, that's that middle of the road that we're attempting to find, to best allow all of our members to continue to enjoy the resources of the shop, but make sure we don't put anybody at risk. And I just wanted to take a moment and make sure everybody understands that one of the reasons we had to make that decision was not just, you know, one of the comments that I got a lot was, well, you know, members don't have to go if they're worried about it. They can stay home. They don't have to go to the shop. But our shift supervisors do. And that was the defining factor that we had to make a decision on. And those shift supervisors, to be fair to them, not only had their own health to consider, but if they picked up something at the shop and brought it home, they had their family to consider. So please keep that in mind as you try to understand why we have done the things we've done. Conversely, we want to be very cautious in making sure that as we move forward, the decision to open the shop and the process that we use to do it protects all of our members to the greatest degree that's humanly possible. And I think, again, as without getting any further into it, I think you're going to be impressed when you hear the plan, and you'll come to appreciate just how much thought and professionalism has gone into it. And I feel very good about it, but again, we're anxious to get your input to it today. I want to thank everybody for sticking with us during this period. It's been a long stretch. People have been disappointed, obviously, at not being able to use the shop. It has not been empty during that entire period. We've done a lot. We've done a lot of maintenance on the shop. We've used the equipment to the degree necessary to keep it going and remaining operable for when we do reopen. We've made some very positive changes to the shop that have nothing to do with COVID that I think you'll be impressed with when you see it. And we've been spending a lot of time trying to communicate what's going on and preparing, as I said, an intelligent and thorough plan for reopening, and we think we're getting close to being ready to do that. Some of the questions that have come up that I wanted to address just very quickly. One of them was a couple of members have come forward and said, well, how come you can't, I want to pause my membership. I want my membership suspended.
You catch that?
Until such time as, you know, you reopen. I shouldn't have to pay dues for a period of time that I can't use the shop. And that would have some merit if we could turn around to our landlord and to SDG&E and people like that, ask them to suspend our rent payments and suspend our utility payments. And obviously that is not viable. So please understand that it's just not financially feasible for us to do that. So that's not going to happen. But what we can do and what we have done is allowed all of our members to carry your slots over when you renew your membership. So even though you haven't been able to use your slots for the last 10 weeks, when you do renew, you'll still have those slots that you have not been able to use and be able to use them as we move forward. Classes is another question. What are you going to do about classes? And we've spent a lot of time planning that as well. But our focus right now is just getting the shop reopened. And once we get it open, then we'll go on and move on and deal with the class situation. Finances, obviously it's been a a negative situation, having to continue to pay expenses without having revenue coming in. We do have a little bit of revenue coming in from renewals, but as most of you know, about 40% of our ongoing revenue stream comes from classes, which have been totally discontinued. So that has hurt on the revenue side. So it's not a good situation, but fortunately we've been very fiscally disciplined since we've opened, and we've built up a nice level of cash reserves. So we are in good shape. It's not something you need to worry about, even if this continues to be a problem for some time. We're prepared to handle the ups and downs of that. The holiday build has continued to meet through Zoom. We have continued to work, and ironically, in spite of 10 weeks of closure, we are off to, Doug made the observation yesterday at our weekly holiday build meeting, that we are off to the best start we've ever been off to. So obviously a lot of work's being done in our own shops, but we continue to communicate via Zoom, and I hope some of you will join us. It's a great effort, and everything is going along well in that area. Okay, enough from me. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis and let him address a couple of points, and then we'll get on to the main event. So Travis.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'd like to start with just seeing if I can't get confirmation from the community using a button down at the very bottom, which is the reactions button, to confirm that I'm very good at muting everybody. Yes, I think that I have muted even the speaker on 2 occasions here. My apologies. We'll now get into this. Look, Gary asked me to talk a little bit about what we've done just recently in a couple of avenues. One has to do with the theme of community. And I personally have, as long as I've been a part of the association, have really been proud to be a part of this community. I think the strongest I felt it as we're building the shop up. I've been seeing especially the shop supervisors step forward and take on a role, and then the groups getting together around special interests and people collaborating around toy building and Christmas gift building. It's such a great community undertaking that when COVID hit and we had to shut down the shop, one of the questions we asked ourselves was, what could we do in the interim to keep this community aspect of what we're doing going? How could we also help fill a void when everybody's sheltered at home to make them feel still connected to others? And a couple of solutions that we came up with were, one, the Zoom network, which we're participating in right now. But if you haven't been involved in one of these, we have had almost 40 different events since the onset of the pandemic. And they range in everything from special interest groups, which we now have 10 of, as opposed to 3 or 4 at the start of this. We've done classes, we've had tours of shops, we've done all sorts of things. Not only are they there for you to participate in when they happen, but we record them and you're able to watch them afterwards. To complement that, because the event only takes an hour or 2 hours, what do you do about all the in-between times? We started up a forum system, and that's where people can go discuss topics. And especially with the special interest groups, there are ongoing discussions on everything from hand tools to lasers to different techniques for resin epoxy and all sorts of things. So those are 2 advents that have come in since the start of the pandemic, really in our wanting to make sure that we had community active and refreshed and in the same good shape, if not better, by the time we were able to get back together again in the shop and at general meetings and such. As the pandemic ebbs and as we're able to resume a version of normal life, the things that we've been bringing on, the Zoom activities and the forums, will recede a little bit, but they'll just be a part of the new way we conduct business in the association. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, Punch Pass has a schedule of all the events. You sign up for them and you get the Zoom links. And on the website, in the community menu, there is something that's called the forums. At forum.sdfwa.org, you can see all the discussions that are taking place and you can join in on them. So last little tidbit I wanted to tell you was another big change, and something we're really quite proud of. A couple of years ago, we had George Von Driska of the Woodworkers Association of America, or www.goa.com, which is his website, come and give a workshop at the shop. Pete had brought him in, and as we were thinking about how we could really do a general meeting in this new context of the pandemic, the idea of bringing in a guest speaker, and we were all very impressed with George. George not only has a good personality for teaching, etc., but he does videos all the time. He's good at it. So we asked Pete if he would reach out again and see if we could get George Von Driska to come in. So next Wednesday, we're doing a Zoom event. We'll have a little bit of business starting in the beginning at 7 o'clock, but then we'll have George telling us about some of the projects that he's been doing in recent years and what motivated him to do that, what he learned, what challenges he had. And it should be a really interesting presentation from him. And you don't have to go out, you don't have to do anything but what you've done today, join a Zoom event. And so I promised Dallas I wouldn't take up too much time. I'll end it right there. I'll just finish off with the fact that over the course of Dallas talking, if you want to ask questions, go ahead and put them into the chat box. That's something you access from the bottom of your screen. And as appropriate, I'll ask the questions of Dallas. And if Mike Lewis is out there, if he'd like to join in with that, I'd appreciate his help on that as well. So Dallas, let me turn it over to you. We find you on the list here and spotlight you.
There, Travis?
Yeah, I'm there. I just don't see you on the list. So hold on. There we are. I see you now. Off to you.
Okay. Well, it is good to see everybody on the screen. It's been way too long, it seems, since we've been together and had the shop community going. I go over to the shop and I see it empty, and it's just really sad to me. And I just can't wait for the day we're going to be able to reopen. Like you, I can't wait for that to happen. The good news is that's going to happen soon. I think we're very close to, I know we're very close to being ready to do that. And we're seeing reopening happening all over the county and all around us, all across the country. And that's really good news. I heard something on TV the other day that kind of captures where I think we are. Just because everything's reopening, just because things are beginning to go back a little bit, doesn't mean the virus has gone away. And we all have to be aware of that. There's different punchlines as to what that means. The first punchline I heard on that said, it just means that the fact of reopening just means that there's enough ventilators at the hospital available to you now. I think what it really means, though, is we've learned how to manage the situation. We've learned more about the virus, learned how to reduce the risk, and we're more comfortable in understanding that transmission doesn't have to be as big a threat as it was when we didn't know all these things. So we've been working and learning more about it. I've learned more about biohazards and viruses than I ever cared to know. I ever thought I'd know, that's for sure. But it has been very helpful to do. We've had a lot of great input from our shop leadership, from our shop supervisors, a number of other people have stepped in and offered to help out. But we have two people who are just our MVPs. They're the ones that have helped us so very much. That is John Palmer and Brenda Wong. They're a husband-wife team. Travis, if you could spotlight them for a second, I'd like to have everybody see who they are as I introduce them. They've got an octopus behind them because they're now retired, but they're also doing some consulting for NOAA, and I think they've been doing some work for them just recently around the COVID thing. John has a PhD in biochemistry. He's managed the safety program for a university, done some tremendous things, unbelievable credentials. We're so fortunate to have him here. And Brenda spent her whole career in biohazard management. I mean, how does it get any better than that, to have members who step up and help us out with that? The right people at the right time, helping provide guidance to us and work very closely with us and make this happen in every step of the way. I cannot thank them enough for the help they've done. So when you see them, thank them. And they're going to be on with us today and available to answer technical questions and any other things that you might think that would be appropriate for them to answer. We have what I think is a very prudent and reasonable plan. Something that will allow us to reopen with minimizing the risk. I won't say no risk by any means. We're following the best guidance we get from John and Brenda and from all the other health professionals we're hearing from and the science that's involved. But I'm not here to tell you that it's the right thing for any member to do to come back into the shop. That's a personal decision, something you have to decide for yourself. And I'm not here to convince you to do that. But I do want you to know what we're doing. I want you to know what the situation is going to be. And I urge you to think thoughtfully about what your decision is. That's something you have to decide. You have to know your own health situation. You have to assess your family situation. You have family members at home who are ill. What does that involve for them? And you have to assess your own personal risk tolerance. Those are things that are way into that calculus and things you have to think through. That's really what needs to happen for a good decision. And I would like to just jump in and tell you now more about our plan. Travis, it says the host is disabled participants screen sharing. Can you help me out with that?
You should be able to now.
Okay. Am I sharing now? Apparently not, huh?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm going to try it again. I was afraid of this.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, I think we're up on the screen now. I'm going to share with you the plan. Nothing like a PowerPoint, I know. Many of you in the corporate world over the years, there's nothing more fun than a PowerPoint. But it does help guide the discussion and help us make the points along the way. And so I have decided to go ahead and proceed with that. We're going to start off by talking about the things we're doing at the shop to minimize the risk for members. We're actually going to be two parts of this discussion. What are we doing at the shop? What are we doing that'll help you be safe? And what can we do to help create an environment in which you have the opportunity to be reduced risk? And then there's a second part we'll talk about a little bit later of things you can do for yourself that will also help enhance that safety factor. But let's start off with the things we're doing at the shop. First, and this I've learned from multiple sources, but particularly from John and Brenda, that face coverings are just something we absolutely have to do. This is a place where we just have no room for discussion. Face coverings are going to be required for everybody in the shop at all times. That's just something we're going to have to do. We're going to talk a little bit in a moment about why that is and why it's important. But I just want to emphasize that one from right up front. That's got to be a given. The 6-foot separation has great value. I'm convinced. If the experts tell us that's what we need to do, and that's what we need to maintain at the shop, we'll be working around that. Commonly touched surfaces, we're going to clean between shifts. We're going to have a place where at the beginning of each shift, the shift supervisor will wipe down with some materials that John will describe later that we'll wipe down things like door handles and blast gates and on-off switches and a few things like that, keyboards, that will allow us to reduce some risk there. We will provide the cleaning supplies at the shop. We're going to reduce occupancy. We just can't have eye openers and other things jammed in there. That's the reason education will have to be curtailed for now until we figure out better ways to accomplish that. And we won't have some of the other fun things we did in the community that brought everybody together. We're not going to have self-check-in anymore. Only the shift supervisors will be checking in using that 6-foot separation. They'll be the only ones handling the keyboard and the computer. Given that we have to wear face masks the whole time, there's not going to be any food or beverage allowed in the shop. And we are unplugging the refrigerators. We've learned that the virus survives well in cold, moist areas. That's the reason, like the packing houses, have hazardous environments, and That's how they store the virus in the labs, is they put it in a cold, damp environment. So we're going to shut off the refrigerators and just not have that Petri drift going. And guess what? That means no licorice there or coffee. We're going to ask members to wipe down surfaces of the tools that they use before and after use. And in the digital tools room, because we're going to reduce the usage to one person there, we'll just have the person who's using the laser or whatever tool they're using just to wipe that down themselves. Now, we've also made a couple little changes in the shop. We have turned those two benches that were in front of the tool wall to 90 degrees. And that gave us a little bit of separation for those who are working the bandsaw, and creates an aisleway where you can walk back and forth there without having to come close to other folks. And it also gives you the opportunity to go in and get tools and not be up close and personal with someone who may be using one of those benches. So those two benches are taken out of service for this period of time, but I think it serves an excellent purpose. We also then have taken those benches and put our cleaning supplies out there. That's the place that we're going to have for you to wipe down anything you're using. And we have the hand sanitizers and other things that we'll talk about in just a moment, all available there. Now I'm going to ask John to talk about the face mask. I told you that I'm convinced that's one of the most important, that is the most important thing we can be doing. I'm going to ask John just to talk about the face mask and what some of the research tells us on that. John?
All right. Travis, you want to turn it over? There we go. Thank you, Dallas. Just quickly, what this little poster shows, and I think it's pretty good and graphic, is that two people wearing face masks, one probably being the unknowledgeable or unknowing and asymptomatic person being the spreader, and the other one being the receiver and healthy at the time, that if both of them have a face mask on, it's much, much less likely to spread droplets of the size that would transmit the virus. So it's a pretty simple thing. And we know at this point that the most likely transmission route is either droplets or aerosols, but certainly droplets with viruses in them. And a sneeze or a cough can spread a couple hundred million virus particles. And a sneeze is like 40,000 droplets, and a cough is like 3,000 droplets. And even speaking loudly, like I am right now, can sort of spread enough droplets to be a good transmission. So back to the poster, I think it's pretty obvious. The poster basically says it all. Relative to the 100% transmission rate, assuming that that would happen with both people not having a mask on, you're down to 1.5% or less. And if you're distancing properly and being cautious, it's a pretty safe environment to have it on. And that's true out in the public too. When you're outside, wear your mask, and hopefully everybody else is, and stay away from people that aren't. That'll protect you there too. All right, next slide. I think Dallas wanted me to talk about this too. The one problem we see, face coverings are great if you wear them and wear them properly, because they're really preventing you, if you don't know you have the disease, from coughing out droplets or spreading droplets even by talking loud. But if you wear an N95 mask or something with a port in it, not a good idea, because that port is an exhale port. And so if you happen to be positive for some reason, you're spreading those droplets. Now you can cover that mask up with another light cloth or something to keep those droplets contained, but they make N95s without the port in there. So basically you're wearing a face covering or a nuisance dust mask or a surgical mask, and just wear it tightly. If it's fogging your glasses, get it under the glasses, get it tight around your nose, and it should work. I've been wearing them quite a bit now, in hours at a time, and they're relatively comfortable. And so they do provide you some protection, and certainly it provides protection for those around you, and the shop deserves that. Okay, next slide. Okay.
So you've heard from the beginning of the pandemic to wash your hands frequently and using soap and water. So the thing is, the virus has an envelope, a fatty lipid envelope that is degraded when you use soap. So that's what degrades the virus and makes it non-viable. Also use hand sanitizer as well. A good thing in the shop is if you're going to turn on a piece of equipment or you have to touch the blast gate or something like that, make sure that you put hand sanitizer on before you touch it. Keep your hands off your face. I know that I often have a difficult time with this. As soon as I put on a mask, something itches, you know, and that's with me all the time. And the face shield is voluntary. You don't need it, but I tell you, it works really well. It's very light, and oftentimes you don't notice it. So if you cough or sneeze, you know, if you have a mask on, sometimes if you cough hard enough, it'll escape out the side of the mask, but the face shield will protect you as well as protecting you. It makes it more noticeable when you want to touch your face, and the face shield is a barrier between you and your face.
Yeah, that T-zone is where you get the virus, usually your eyes, your nose, or your mouth.
So they call that the T-zone, and it's your portal of entry for the virus. So you want to always keep that covered. And of course, maintain the 6-foot distance. And nitrile gloves, some people really need them now because they're washing their hands so much that their hands become chapped. And in the wood shop, you know, it also protects you from, you know, touching chemicals, solvents, oils, things like that may cause, you know, skin irritation.
Or even just the cleaning agents. Some people are sensitive to the alcohol and other cleaning agents. So, all right, next slide.
Before we leave that one, I just want to comment. In the past, we've had a requirement that we prohibited any type of gloves being used in the shop. This is a change in our practice and for just during this period of time until we, for the foreseeable future, we will allow the tight-fitting nitrile gloves.
Yeah. You want dexterity on there. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just because there was a question that relates to eye cover, John was curious whether that idea of eye covering or any sort of eye protection was a requirement or whether it was just a guideline.
Well, I think it should really be a requirement in a shop, just because we have so much chance of particulates and literally flying chips and stuff getting around anyways. We sort of have that requirement, and it really is one route of entry for the virus too. So if somebody manages to sneeze, cough, or do something else, that eye protection really does help. It's not a universal protectant, but it's a heck of a good idea. So I would say you really want to abide by that.
In the shop area, the machine room, it is required, but if you're in the other areas, that's going to be a personal choice.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the line to be drawn. Outside of the shop area, then it's a personal choice, but it's obviously a good idea from what you've said. And John.
Yeah, exactly right, Travis. I was going to say, additionally, the reality is when I go out into the environment, I wear my regular glasses, but I actually wear safety glasses sometimes underneath these or over these, simply because if somebody sneezes off to the side of me, that's a pretty good level of protection for my eyes too.
Great,
So
thank you.
Here's some of the cleaning agents that we're recommending and they're available in the shop. The very first one is obviously just the Germex hand sanitizer. There'll be several pumps around there, including a big bottle, and we'll have backups for that. But that's a great way if you can't run to the washroom and wash your hands or wash your gloves. So those are hand sanitizers. So both that, the foamy soap that's in the bathroom. Then the middle one is 70% isopropanol in a spray bottle, but I've put in a mix of essential oils. And the benefit there is if you're spraying something that might rust, the alcohol evaporates pretty rapidly, and that's done the disinfection. Essential oils are sort of a disinfectant. They will destroy the virus or bacteria, but they remain afterwards. So it's sort of like giving a spritz of WD-40 after you've sprayed it with a little alcohol solution that might be a little wet. So once the alcohol is gone, there's a little oil left. And if you rub it off with a paper towel, that surface is much less likely to rust. The other surface cleaning agents there, the spray bottle, the foaming spray, the scrubbing bubbles was found to be very effective in the anthrax issue. And it's very good at, again, destroying things like the virus or the lipid envelopes and stuff. But it's really easy to see. So if you have a large surface like a tabletop that you've been using a lot, and or somebody else has been using, and you want to make sure it's clean, you spray that down, let it wet for a few, 30 seconds or a minute, and then sort of wipe it up with a little wet rag, and it's really good. The most convenient disinfection route is the Clorox wet wipes, which we'll have the little pop-up dispensers of, because they're easy to use. You can wipe something down, a knob, a switch, or whatever, and just throw them away. And so they're effective. They have a quaternary disinfectant in them. Usually that's effective on bacteria and viruses in 15 to 30 seconds. So again, those are the tools we've got on hand. We may have a few other things for shift supervisors if it becomes easy, but right now we think that'll cover it. We may have some alcohol wipes before we go to that for the digital room, and that's only so people can wipe the keyboards and mice down with like a little rip open alcohol wipe so that they can disinfect it before they use it. All right, Dallas.
Okay, I think most of you, if not everybody actually should have received a message from PunchPass saying we're requiring a waiver signed, a document signed before we proceed into the shop. Before anybody can use the shop, we're asking every member to acknowledge their willing to comply with the rules we have in the shop, and we've restated those in these 12 points. I'm not going to read them to you today. We'll have them in the shop, and you have them on PunchPass, and we will. This is what we'll be asking our shift supervisors to make sure we pay attention to, and these are the key elements that are going to keep the shop much safer. So our next stops. Our target date, and I think we're going to make it, is to reopen on June 1st. I mentioned reduced occupancy earlier. The way we're going to do that to start, we're going to start slowly, is we'll have, in PunchPass, we'll only allow 3 slots in the machine room, 1 person in the laser room, and 1 on the CNC would be the max. Not mentioned on there is the 3D printer that doesn't get quite as much use, but tend to move the 3D printer temporarily into the classroom so that if someone wanted to use a 3D printer at the same time as the laser is going, we can have an additional slot for that. So we'll work through that. When you go into PunchPass, when you see PunchPass in the future, change the time that the non-digital tool slots start. That's kind of a mouthful of words, but basically the traditional slots, you want to go in and use the machine room, you want to go in and use the tools. The policy's been you get a 3-hour time slot over a 4-hour period. So for instance, on a Monday, we have a shift that opens at 11 o'clock. Either Mary or Brian would be there for that. And they'd open the shop at 11. You have 3 hours between 11 and 4 in which you could do your 3-hour period. Instead of doing that, we're going to open the shop for the machine room at 11:30. And that's to give the shift supervisor a little time to do the wipe down and to get things ready so that we know that the surfaces are starting up in condition to the startup condition. We will open the shop for the lasers and CNC because those at 11 o'clock in this example, we'll have an 11 to laser slots. In this example, we'd have 11 to 1 and a 1 to 3. And that was because in the laser room, you're expected to wipe down the surfaces you're going to use and do your own disinfecting before you use the space. So we don't need time for the shift supervisor to accomplish that. Then after we get a little bit of experience, hopefully it'll go smoothly and everything looks good. I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time down there talking with the shift supervisors, but also using that video camera system. I'm sure Gary, Travis, and I and others will be doing that. We're just going to go back and review and see how we're doing on keeping our distances, how we're doing on making sure that masks are being worn and we're complying with all our rules. And as we get a little bit more experience with that, it doesn't have to be a long period of time, we'll start gradually expanding our slots. So that would be the next steps. So,
Dallas, there
yes.
are some questions. If you would have gone to take some questions that have come from the chat room.
That's what we're at right now.
Okay, so there was I think in part because we have a picture of someone wearing a shield and we had that conversation about the machine room versus other areas, there's not real clarity on should we have a shield when we're there? What must we wear in the machine room? If you could clarify what your vision is on the policy, then that would help people understand.
The machine room, let me start with what the requirement is. The requirement in the machine room has always been safety glasses. That's always been the case. And that continues to be the case. Now, John, and I guess Brenda spoke to that slide. There's a lot of good health reasons why a face shield is a good idea, and that's a personal choice. We are putting rules in place that will protect everybody else in the room. If you choose to, if you want to have extra protection, your own protection, wearing that face shield will help you from not touching your face, is what John and Brenda are telling us, that's been proven to be the case. It helps you with chips, but it's not a requirement.
Okay. The next question had to do with whether or not we could put that wonderful poster of the face masks up somewhere in the shop. It was such a great graphic. People really liked that. And that would be a good source of reinforcement.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Another thing that came up many times was an appreciation from people for what John and Brenda had been doing for us. There were a lot of accolades in the chat room, and we can't say that enough. So guys, thank you so much for what you've done. Dallas, there was also a question about whether we know of anybody in our community who did get the virus.
I'm unaware of anyone who has. I do know of one person who had a family member who didn't know that they had any symptoms, don't know if they ever had, but they did go in for a test and had a positive PCR test, something that said at one time, or an antibody test, whatever that is, that says at one time they must have had it because they had the immunity in their system. But that happened long ago, so we don't believe there's any real issue there. But I'm unaware of anything, and I think I or one of the leadership would have known it.
Right, I haven't heard of anything either. There is a question about knowing when any new member comes in and whether or not they should have access to the shop. Is there any way that we're going to test them? That's not a scenario I personally have thought about. What's your reaction to that question?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I'll just read it to you literally. How will we test new members prior to allowing them access to the shop? I don't think they're any different from our normal members, just your policy as you described, right?
The hands-on.
I suspect the question is about host.
Yep.
I suspect the question is about host.
Ah, that could be, yes.
And that's Nancy Bosacker and I have had this conversation. We have some members who signed up, paid their dues, got all set, and are ready to be examined just before the shop is suspended. That sucks. And I'm going to take one of those folks this week is what I'm trying to arrange, and doing the host with them just to see if that can be done responsibly. I think it can. What we'll do is I plan on doing the written and the introductions, do all the verbal stuff over Zoom.
Yep.
And then I'm going to do the host on the floor when the shop is closed, and then do the 6-foot distancing. I'm going to test it that way. I think that's possible to do.
Great.
Right now, we don't have any new members coming in, but we do have some that we're in the process of being
Hosted.
Yeah.
So there's one thing which I know you've thought about, Dallas, and it was asked about in the chat room, having to do with our being able to maybe restart classes with maybe smaller class sizes, or maybe having Zoom be a component. Can you talk about what your thoughts were on that?
Well, maybe I'll turn, this maybe is a good one for Gary, but the discussion has been that once we want to see how things go in the shop first, get that all bedded down, get our members going there, but then the possibility of doing the classroom portion of classes using Zoom, and then breaking the lab portion, the hands-on portion, into much smaller groups, to where we could do this in just a few people at a time. That's much more difficult to do, but I think it's probably the most reasonable. Gary, you want to chime in on that?
Well, you've hit it right on the head. That's exactly what Paul and I are working toward. We'll probably, just for everybody's edification, when we shut down, we were right in the middle of an introduction to woodworking class. We had conducted the first session, so we got 3 sessions left that we owe those folks. Plus, we had sold out the next session. So we've got 20 people who have paid for instruction on just in that class alone that they haven't gotten. To their credit, not one of those, by the way, has asked for a refund. So
Wow.
again, we're getting tremendous support from our members and tremendous understanding of the fact that we're all trying to figure out a way to work through this. But yes, that's the plan, is we'll probably do the lecture portion on Zoom, and Paul and his team of assistants will take small groups, 1 or 2, or at the most 3 at a time to do the lab portion.
We've been testing this with testing. It's kind of a more of a unique class, but Paul Duffy is teaching the CNC class, and he was in the middle of the class when we shut down, had 4 students in there. He did the final classroom portion of that yesterday on Zoom. I sat in for just a little bit of that. And then he's doing the hands-on portion just one-on-one. So they're getting the rest of their experience that way.
That one worked out, Dallas. That one worked out very well. It turns out that 3 of the 4 students have their own CNC machines.
Well, we can't count on that every time.
Very good.
So
Hey,
we just have one to bring into the shop, but it turned out very well. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Dallas, you know how we have people coming in and doing maintenance on machines or doing cleanup, et cetera. There was a question about whether, with these guidelines of having just 1 person at CNC, 1 on the laser, 3 in the machine room, and a shop supervisor, if those people would still be allowed to come into the shop. Could you talk about how strict that cap is and whether those people will still be allowed to add to the caps you put in place?
The answer to that is no. That's one of the things that we're going to have to do, is do those activities in off hours. And even for things like the holiday build and toy group, we want to get those restarted and get going. I see that as being requiring a reservation. It'll have to run over a longer period of time, using our cap as a requirement. But for tool maintenance, for doing some shop projects, doing all these other activities, we just got to keep the occupancy of the shop down. The guideline still says 10 maximum in the shop, in the space. I believe that's still the general rule. The fact is, as soon as we have more and more people back together, the more risk, and we're trying to minimize that. So to start with, we're going to be holding to that requirement.
Okay.
We're also not going to be doing drop-in shop tours for people who may want to join the shop. That's something we're just going to have to postpone. Right now, we're not taking any new members in anyhow. We have members who are trying to use the shop. We can't be putting more people in right now.
Okay. Your face mask poster is a very popular topic in the chat room. Some people would like to get a copy of it so that they could take it around with them, post it at work, that sort of thing. So if that could be shared, that's a request that we have out there.
We'll put that up on the resources on the forum.
Okay, great, excellent. There's a question here about health surveys. Somebody said that at their work, everybody is required to fill out a health survey before they come back in. And they were wondering whether or not that was any part of our formulation.
We have in our
attestation.
In our set of member responsibilities, we have an individual responsibility for that. Michael and I'm in contact with Michael, and we're seeing if there's something we can do in Punch Pass along those lines, so that we do that in advance. But we're not going to have a screening at the door, if that's what you're asking.
Got it. When will we be able to sign up for shop spots via Punch Pass?
Okay, thanks I'm glad somebody asked that question. I failed to mention that in there. I blocked out the ability to reserve slots in Punch Pass. We will put out an announcement to everyone via a message that will go to all shop members, and I expect that to come out fairly soon. And then we'll open up then the slots that are there. One of the things I'm going to ask is, look, we've got a lot of folks that have got a lot of projects they want to do. Please be considerate of others. Don't book up all the slots. We're just going to have to share the space that we have available. We're going to try and get as many people in as we can, but don't go in there and just lock out all the laser slots or all the shop slots, whatever it may be. Be careful about doing that, and by all means, if you reserve a slot, make sure you show up. don't reserve a slot in a nutshell.
Right.
But I'm expecting that that we'll have that early next week, maybe on Tuesday or so.
Okay, great. There's a question about how we're starting off slow and then we'll expand, but there wasn't really a sense of how we'll know whether we can expand. How is it that we will know that what we're doing is effective? Do you have a feel for that?
That gating criteria is pretty interesting. My thought is that what we need to see is how we're doing on keeping the distances and how good a compliance we have. That's really the limitation we have. Are we able to keep members from congregating? Is there congestion? You know, if you get over towards one of the things that Doug and the Holiday Bill group, they did some testing for me. Tried it out the other day. They found if you're using the 20-inch planer, and then you need to use the 6-inch joiner, you get within 6 foot of each other. So we're trying to get a sense of how that works when we get to 3. If it looks like we can orchestrate things in such a way that people can maintain the 6 foot distance, then we'll go to 4. And we'll just keep pushing that until we see how that goes and see how the distancing is. It's really a matter of the distancing that we're trying to accomplish by reducing the occupancy.
This next question I kind of wished had been misspelled, because misspelled it would have been a much more interesting question. I'll read it as though it had been misspelled. Is a banana okay as a face mask?
Yeah.
Is a bandana okay as a face mask?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that okay? I mean,
Let me answer.
You.
Yeah, you got me okay? Can you hear me?
yes,
Yep.
go ahead, John.
Yeah. So we had a presentation from a scientist that looked at the material and the number of droplets that got through. And they said the tighter the weave, obviously cotton or otherwise, you know, if you have a 600 thread count sheet they're using and you do 4 layers, it's really effective, probably as effective as anything else. But if you have a very open weave bandana and you don't double it up, it's going to be less effective from you coughing or spreading the droplets. And it's certainly less effective if you're trying to protect yourself. So it's a judgment call. It is a face covering, but you really want to use a pretty dense or quilted sort of bandana or something like that, or multiple layers of it. But yeah, it'll work. So
The basic requirement, though, John, correct me if I'm wrong, this is what our discussion was, is that it has to be something that fits tight enough that it's not going to just be kind of a covering, but that it was something that would capture droplets should you sneeze or as you're talking loudly. Is that correct?
right. Yeah, in general, what we worry about with face masks, actually N95s, all the medical workers worry about an actual fit test. It's hard with the beard or something else to get a really tight one, but you want it to touch your face and your nose and everything else relatively well to capture everything both ways, in and out. If there's lots of gaps, you breathe out, it goes through the gap. If you breathe in, certainly if you're worried about yourself, you breathe in, it's going to suck in through the opening rather than through the mask. So the best thing to say is whatever you're wearing should be effective at covering your face, your nose, your mouth, and relatively tight to the face. You don't want to have a lot of loose gaps.
Great.
So,
just for everybody's information, courtesy of Alan, the COVID mask numbers, that there's a image that's been put into the chat room. Anybody can go ahead and download it.
oh,
And
wow, great.
Don't be surprised if Marvin Miles shows up with a banana on his face, because he found that to be a pretty good alternative.
You like that?
Okay.
Dallas, this is something which I know you've thought about, and it makes a lot of sense to consider, but the whole notion of airflow and whether we're doing anything to have the air flow certain ways to minimize exposure or lingering particles. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we have talked about that. One of the things that's been suggested, and we're going to, when I meet with the shift supervisors, we're going to encourage is we're going to turn on the exhaust fans in the building. We'll probably need that as we're coming towards summer anyhow. And then the other thing we discussed is the opening that back door. To the extent we can do that, we're going to open up that and allow more airflow in and out of the building.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a question here that I guess would be, in the event someone did find themselves to be positive, and our ability to then notify others that they should self-quarantine or whatever the approach is, do we have any protocol thought through for that, or will it just deal with it when it comes up?
We will be using the county health for that purpose.
Okay.
They will do the contact tracing, and we would, if we had that, we would immediately shut down the shop and use county health to help guide the tracing
Process, yep.
Okay. Another person was just wanting some clarification on what you had said, that at check-in only shop supervisors would be using the computer. Could you talk about that one more time?
In the past, we've had an option on the check-in computer. Either the shift supervisor could check in, or the shift supervisor could set it up for self check-in, where you can go in, key in your name, and do it. We only want the shift supervisor handling that computer. We're just going to leave that for them, and we want the person to come in. The shift supervisor will recognize who it is at 6 feet, and put in their attendance into the computer.
Okay. There was a suggestion here that we have our 3-hour shop slots and only 3 people at a time. So it's obviously going to be a limited flow through. What might we do perhaps to do some shorter shop slots if people only need to use it for an hour or something like that? Just an idea that someone had for how we could get more people into this process.
So if you just had to come in and do a little planing, you didn't tie up the shop the whole time.
Exactly.
I get it. I'm not sure how to accomplish that, but that's an interesting thought.
Okay. Let's see what else we have here. More comments about the poster.
It's cute.
So we'd like to actually, I guess, if you don't mind, Dallas, go ahead and open it up so that we can just see the gallery of everybody.
That'd be great.
And if you could let go of your screen share, then we'll have more. And at this point, since the questions have sort of slowed down, why don't we go ahead and, people, you can unmute yourselves if you have other questions of Dallas or Gary or John or Brenda. Now's your chance to do that.
This is Mark Gare. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I work in the medical field. When most of us get home, we change our clothes, put them in the washer immediately, try to protect our family members, just to add to what John Palmer has talked about.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're out in the environment, obviously, if you're in the medical field, you're more likely to have come in contact with a possible COVID positive person. But on the other hand, when you're out, it's good to take your shoes off or have a procedure to do that. Take your mask off and put it down. The real problem with all the PPE issues is people tend to grab the surface that might be contaminated, and you need to be careful. So for personal safety, it's a good idea.
Hey, Dallas, I got a quick question.
Sure.
Travis skipped me, but that's okay. So you don't have any plan to do a temperature check of people walking in the shop, do you?
We do not, no. What we're understanding from many sources is by the time they have a temperature, the horse is out of the barn. They should know that already. We're asking members to not come in. They have that issue, but just the process of doing it, just one more place we're going to have to get closer, and it'd be a real administrative problem. I don't think.
On the other hand, even though it's not a guaranteed symptom, we're checking our temperature 2-3 times a day. We certainly do it when we go out and stuff just to make sure. It's an easy thing if you've got a thermometer to check it, but it's just one more way to self-isolate if you find you are getting a temperature, and then pay attention to other symptoms. So, yeah.
Okay.
Just real quickly, Patty put words to it, but I think probably an awful lot of us are thinking this thought, which is just how appreciative we are of the work that you guys have put into planning this. And it seems like such a responsible job, and it's being put forward. We've got Mark putting up an applause up there with his reactions. Does that pop at the bottom of the screen? Let's do that, man, because I think that these guys have done an incredible job. Thank you so much for what you've done. Other questions?
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Good, thank you.
One thing I do want to mention though is our shift supervisors.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, these are members who've just really stepped up and do so much. I called and talked to just about every shift supervisor. I've missed a couple for one reason or another, but to the person, they're eager to get back. Almost all are going to be able to be back and eager to get back onto their shifts and help get the shop running. You just can't say enough about about how much they mean to our shop. It would not run without those shift supervisors.
Hey,
Dallas, have you
just-
stopped taking new applications?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you stopped taking new applications for membership?
We're not taking, we're taking a wait list. People can be on the wait list, but right now, our ability to bring them in and to have slots available and to train them, we just don't have the ability to do that right now, but we've got a wait list going. We got a lot of people on the wait list, by the way.
Hey, Dallas, one comment about the mask in the shop. When we did the beta test for 3 people in the shop, one of the things we found is very hard to communicate to each other when you had a mask on. So people are going to have to be cognizant of what's going on around them, and shift supervisors are going to maybe have to use hand signals or another means of getting people's attention, because you can't hear someone within 6 feet of each other communicating with a mask. So that is going to be a challenge in itself, something we can work around, but just people need to be cognizant of not being able to easily communicate through the mask.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. Motion should be slow. I mean, if you need to go use a tool, you know, you're going to have to sort of catch people's attention to make sure they know which way you're moving. I absolutely agree with it. It's going to be tough, but that's what watching those videos and watching the cameras a little bit, we'll see whether we can even open it more if people are paying attention. So
We're just going to have to figure it out, you know,
Yep,
as
yep.
we go along.
Good call.
Yeah, I had a question about that point specifically, because usually how it would work is a member would have some tool usage concern or question and have to go to a shift supervisor. And if you can't talk to them from 6 feet away, I'm not sure that's going to work out.
Can you have a code and then move into the classroom and use the classroom for discussion?
That's exactly right.
That'd probably work, yeah.
It's going to take some getting used to. I've been part of this testing, and one of the things people are going to have to learn is just that: is the questions are going to have to be moved to the classroom. I mean, you're literally going to have to take that extra step. The other thing I will caution you is that while I thought I was being very cautious, I've a couple of times caught myself getting within 6 feet of somebody else, and that is much easier to do than you might imagine. And people are going to have to develop an ability when you finish the use of a particular tool. Before you start moving around, you literally got to look up and chart your course and ask yourself, is it clear? Can I get through there? Or am I going to have to find another way around? You just can't fall back on the tried and true process of the shortest distance is a straight line. You might have to alter your practice.
Gary,
We have to extend our situational awareness out to maybe 8 feet, just with boards and just moving around the shop.
Hey, Gary, since you did speak up, one of the burning questions in the chat room had to do with how it is this many weeks into the pandemic, your hair still looks so good.
Well, let me address that, just to put any notion aside that I've been cheating by finding a barber. I started looking like the wild man from Borneo. My hair grows fast, and I was in serious trouble. And I noticed on one of the Zoom meetings that Travis looked like he'd snuck off to Arizona to get a haircut. So I asked him how he did it, and he gave me he was kind enough to give me detailed instructions on how to do it. I bought myself a trimmer. I actually trimmed the front and the sides and the top myself. My wife cut my back.
Oh, wow.
And it's not perfect, but well, I'll tell you what, at least I got it off my ears and I can live again. So that's how it happened.
Tips from the
Some of us are luckier.
Also, there was another question, and it's just related to the general meeting. It's a really burning issue. Will there be a raffle? Yes. Jim Strawn is doing everything he can to make sure we have a raffle, okay?
All right, good. Hey, let me add real quick on the passing of 6 foot, you know, and stuff. I mean, the county uses this guideline too of 6 foot, and then if you penetrate the 6 foot and you're in proximity for more than 10 minutes, you've increased your risk substantially. So passing like ships in the night quickly without breathing is something that probably doesn't add a lot of risk, but we really want to be cognizant because there's a whole level of risk perception and risk tolerance that is different for our members. So we really want to be careful and situationally aware, but it probably doesn't add a lot of risk to have pass by somebody by raising your hand and say, John, I need to get by for a second. Can you just stop breathing? You know?
Hey,
Hold your
Dallas,
breath.
Dallas, a question that came up from John has to do with the tools that are more frequently used in the machine room, maybe having some tape stripes put around it just to know the boundary around it.
Yeah.
I know that in general, there has been talk about doing some marking. Is there any marking that's going on in the floor of the shop?
We haven't done that. It's one of those things we hadn't considered. That's when we talk with the shift supervisor, I'm planning getting the shift supervisors together this week by Zoom. We'll discuss that, where that might be appropriate and if it'd be helpful.
Also,
Yeah, when we're
sorry, go ahead.
when we're in Tuesday, Dallas, I was thinking that with Sharon and stuff like that, when we test this out for the shift supervisor a little bit, or your trial run through, I was thinking of bringing not only the banner tape in, but some tape for the floor, just in case we want to sort of see where 6 foot is relative to a switch or a standing position for something. So, yeah.
Okay.
Dallas, there was also a reminder that we do have the whiteboards, and scuba divers can't talk with one another very well.
Yeah.
So using the whiteboards in the
Sure.
bench room is a good alternative.
Yeah.
I have a question about the waiver. I assume that I signed it online. Is that good enough, or are we supposed to sign it when we get to the shop?
No, the online is good enough. What we're really hoping, though, what I really want people to do is not just click through and agree to it. I want you to know what you're agreeing to and what you're committing to. But yeah, we're not gonna have a paper one there for you too.
Any other questions for Dallas?
I'd like to go ahead and officially end the meeting. I don't want to terminate the discussion because everybody's welcome to stay on and continue, but if people are hanging on just because they think there's going to be some magical comments here at the end by me, let me attempt to meet your expectation by simply saying thank you to everybody for being here, but particular thanks to Dallas and his team, and certainly John and Brenda for the tremendous amount of work and thought that I think you can all see has been put into this. And just stress again that, like always, we're all in this together, and this will be as effective as all of us working together make it. So please take it seriously, do what you can to help us, and continue to give us feedback. It's a living plan, and we'll change it and try to make it better in every way we can, just by taking your feedback. So,
hey Gary, just a quick plug, because I just noticed Tom Schultz here on the screen. This man puts effort into our newsletter every single issue, and his most recent one is up on the website. It's our special issue to sort of recognize some of the changes that we've been going through in the pandemic. It's very different from what we've seen in the past. I think he did an excellent job, and it's there on the website to be downloaded. So go check it out.
Okay. It's nice.
Thank you guys for all you've done. Fantastic.
Hey,
Thank
and
you.
one thing I want to add too is the idea here is to make this practically useful. So we've had to do this with scientists all the time in the lab. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we'll change it. But obviously, we want something that works and gives us a level of protection and comfort. So we welcome feedback too as we work through this initial few weeks of opening. So yep.
Okay then. So Gary, you're asking Dallas and me to stick around in the event anybody has any questions, but others are just welcome to leave, right? Okay.
We were waiting for the raffle.
Show up on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Good idea. Hey, Dallas, I
7
got a
p.m.
question for you.
Yeah.
So there's nothing of a governmental bureaucratic issue here that we have to do.
Yeah. You don't have to.
Okay.
No, we're
That's
in
member
good shape on that one.
Yeah.
We're not going to have the COVID police on our ass.
No, we're well beyond any requirements. We're not a public business where we have retail business where we have that. We're under 10. We're good.
Yeah.
I've got a question. So I've got a half-face respirator, one of the 3M1s, that's a lot more comfortable to wear than an N95 mask, but it's got the output flapper filter, or the valve on it. So do you guys know of any DIY way to put some kind of output filter on the respirator to make it safe for others?
Yeah, that's funny because I've been looking at all that stuff, either internally or externally by the flapper valve itself. So, you know, I bought like the face cleaning little things for makeup and stuff, the little cotton you know, sort of like a expanded cotton ball or whatever, or just wearing a light face covering over your mask, over those exhale ports or port, whichever would sort of do it. Right, Dallas?
Can you bring some of those into the shop?
Yeah, I'm going to bring some examples in on Tuesday, and we'll leave them around as options for making a cover. So Brenda just brought in these little things here. I don't know if you can see a little cotton thing that's pretty thick, you know, and stuff. And if you can put that over the valve, tape it over it internally, it should not restrict your breathing, but it would restrict droplets from getting out of the mask. So they also do make N95s that are pretty comfortable that don't have the exit valve in them too. So, but it's a good question because I was looking for that myself. It's like, what could I do if I wanted to wear one with a valve in it and make it safe?
So I have a question related to that. You know, are the shop supervisors going to be kind of on the hook to kind of look at everybody's mask and say, you know, that's good, that's not good? How, you know, it seems like a lot of pressure on them to be the judge. How you can do that?
That hard to see if you've got a mask on. We're not going to be doing any sort of a testing on it. Main thing we're trying to do is just break up the direct flow of material coming out of your mouth, and that's not hard to see.
Yeah.
And we can see if you got a valve in there or not on the
yeah. So, and then the videos will help us. The video review will help us a little bit to see if we see any questionable issues, and we'll try to address them. So.
This touches on an important point, though, and Dallas talked about it, or somebody talked about it once, and I'd just like to reiterate it is, you know, if you're not thanking these shift supervisors every time you visit the shop, you're missing the boat. These people are the engine that keeps the shop running, and
they're our front line in this particular case.
We've talked a lot about the issue of them having to enforce and deal with some of these things. For example, that taking the temperature thing, we spent a lot of time discussing that. One more thing they would have to do, and one more confrontation they would have to face if the temperature was out of the norm. So please be sensitive to the shift supervisor. If they ask you to do something, for heaven's sakes, do it. And you know, wearing masks is not an option. The more everybody polices themselves, the easier it makes their job.
And a thank you is definitely well deserved for anybody that takes their time and does the cleaning, the pre-cleaning, and everything else. That's an effort. It's it's above and beyond as a volunteer member. So
Jim and Sharon, I just wanted to point out that the way couples can be on these things is the way John and Brenda are doing this.
Well, I've often said I want to keep her 6 foot away, but it doesn't work. So, she also wants to cut my hair, and I'm a little afraid of that too.
We're socially isolating too.
Okay, we seem to be winding down. Gary, do you want to wind it up?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Thanks again to everybody, and can't wait to see you all in the shop.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for all the help. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.